The military academy orbited a pale blue gas giant, its steel structures gleaming like a crown in the upper atmosphere. Ships came and went in disciplined streams, each carrying recruits from across the spiral arm. They were the elite of their species, towering warriors, cunning tacticians, and genetically sharpened predators, each certain of their own dominance. It was not a place for the weak. That was why the laughter spread so quickly when the human stepped off the shuttle. Lieutenant Mayakata was not frail, but compared to the hulking reptilians with plated hides, or the insectoids whose limbs were bladed and jointed for war, she seemed unremarkable. She was average height, average build, her dark hair tied tight against the back of her neck. There was no visible armor fused into her skin, no venom sacs, no horns or claws. When the alien cadets caught sight of her, their amusement was immediate. To them, she was prey wearing a uniform. Fragile, one of the reptilians hissed in a tongue half-growled, his words translated by the Academy's comm implants. His companions chuckled, voices resonating like stones grinding together. She will snap before the first drill ends. Maya kept her eyes forward, expression still, but she felt the heat of their stays. Her orders had been clear. Humanity was to be represented in the interstellar command structure, and she had been chosen to prove that Earth was worthy of recognition. She would not let the mockery see her falter. The Academy's drills began at dawn, though the station's artificial cycle blurred time. In the training arena, recruits fought until exhaustion. The insectoids darted in flurries of chitin and precision strikes. The reptilians fought with crushing strength, claws raking against reinforced armor plating. Even the mammalian predators, covered in thick fur and bone ridges, tore through targets with frightening grace. Maya's turn came, and silence briefly replaced the laughter. They wanted to see her break. She stood across from a six-limbed insectoid cadet, whose forelegs ended in curved sides that glimmered under the lights. The signal rang, and her opponent lunged. Her instinct screamed to dodge, and she did, barely avoiding a slicing strike. The next came faster, forcing her backward step after step. She tried to counter with a compact shock baton issued for training, but her swing glanced harmlessly against the insectoid's carapace. The alien pressed harder, and within moments Maya was flat on her back, weapon torn from her grip. The arena filled with jeering. The insectoid bowed mockingly, a predator dismissing its meal. Maya rose with quiet precision, retrieved a baton, and refused to meet anyone's eye. It would have been easier to shrink under their scorn, but she forced her breathing to steady. This was only the beginning, she told herself. Days passed, and every drill reinforced a weakness in their eyes. She could not match their speed, their reach, or their strength. When they carried heavy loads, she strained to keep up. When they sparred, she left bruised and battered while they stood untouched. Yet despite it all, she returned each day, body aching but posture unbroken. The instructors, grizzled veterans of countless campaigns, rarely commented. One of them, a scarred avian with a steel beak, observed her more than the others. He said little, but his eyes lingered on her when she refused to yield, when she forced herself upright again and again after defeat. It was during one evening's endurance drill that he finally spoke to her. They were alone in the weightless chamber, where recruits trained their adaptability. She was clumsy at first, drifting and fumbling, but she kept trying until sweat clung to her temples. The avian's rasping voice carried across the chamber. You are not the fastest. You are not the strongest. You are not the most resilient. And yet you persist. Do you know why you are here, human? Maya gripped the chamber rail, chest heaving. To prove that my people belong. The avian tilted his head, feathers rustling. Perhaps. Or perhaps to show these children that strength is not measured only by claw or carapace. He turned away before she could answer, talons clicking against the steel, leaving her with the echo of his words. The next day, whispers followed her as she walked the barracks hall. The laughter had not stopped, but there was a sharper edge to it now, curiosity threaded into derision. Some recruits wondered how long she would last before requesting transfer. Others took bets on whether she would survive the coming survival exercise. Her presence unsettled them, though they would never admit it aloud. Maya endured the stares, the snide remarks, the dismissive gestures. At night she lay on her narrow bunk, staring at the unfamiliar constellations outside the viewport, and forced herself to remember why she had come. Humanity's history was written in survival, in the refusal to break even when every environment seemed hostile. She told herself the academy would be no different. One evening, as the cadets gathered in the mess hall, a towering reptilian recruit addressed her directly. His scales gleamed like burnished bronze, and his chest was marked with the scars of ritual combat. He loomed over her table, his voice carrying across the room. "You should not be here, human. This place is for predators, not prey." The hall quieted, dozens of alien eyes turning to watch. Maya looked up at him, her jaw tightening. Every instinct told her to remain silent, but she forced the words out evenly. "Then let's see which of us survives." The reptilian bared his teeth, laughter rumbling deep in his chest. He returned to his seat, but the challenge hung heavy in the air. The others muttered, some amused, others intrigued. That night, Maya dreamed of Earth, of forests and plains where her ancestors had once been the smallest creatures among giants. Yet they had endured. They had learned to outthink, to cooperate, to turn predators into allies. She woke with the memory sharp in her mind, a reminder that survival had never belonged only to the strongest body, but to the sharpest will. The days ahead promised harsher trials, and every recruit knew it. For the moment, Maya remained the academy's anomaly, the subject of ridicule and bets. But a subtle shift had begun. The laughter no longer dismissed her entirely. It lingered uneasily, like prey mocking another animal, only to wonder, in the back of its mind, what might happen if the roles changed. And though she carried bruises across her arms and aches in her bones, Maya walked into the next drill with her head high, her silence daring them to laugh again. The announcement came during morning assembly. The cadets lined in serried ranks beneath the academy's vast dome. The instructors stood above them on a raised platform, feathers, scales, and steel gleaming beneath the artificial sun. Their voices carried through the calm implants with perfect clarity, leaving no room for doubt. The apex trial would begin at dusk. Even among the seasoned recruits, a ripple of unease spread. Everyone knew the reputation of the trial, a tradition whispered about in hushed tones. It was not a duel, nor a contest of strength, but survival against something none of them were meant to defeat. The instructors called it a measure of composure under lethal threat. The cadets knew better. It was terror, engineered and unleashed. Maya Carter felt the shift in the air, the subtle tightening of posture, the suppressed tremors that passed between rivals and comrades alike. For once, no one laughed at her. The reptilian scales flushed darker, a tell of nervous heat. The insectoids flexed their sides and mandibles with anxious rhythm. Even the towering mammalians, whose voices usually thundered with bravado, spoke in lower tones. The Vulcan was no myth to them. It was a predator that stalked every nightmare of cadets past. At dusk, the transports carried them into the training grounds, an artificial wilderness of rock spires, dense undergrowth, and shadowed valleys. The environment was programmed to mimic the Vulcan's natural hunting terrain. The cadets were given no weapons beyond the standard issue baton and a ration set of shock charges, hardly more than a gesture. The instructor's final command echoed as the transports departed: survive until extraction. Do not engage unless there is no other choice. The group scattered almost immediately. The reptilians formed their own pack, trusting in brute strength. The insectoids vanished into the trees, their bodies adapted for stealth. The mammalians claimed the high ridges, snarling that no beast would approach their ground. Maya was left alone, her presence uninvited and her silence unremarked. She did not run. She crouched low in the underbrush, listening. The air itself seemed to tighten. A soundless pressure crept along the edges of perception, a silence deeper than silence. And then she heard it, a growl, low and resonant, vibrating through stone and bone alike. The Vulcan emerged from the shadows with a grace that belied its size. It was enormous, its body rippling with muscle beneath iridescent hide. Its jaws gleamed with teeth curved like scythes, each large enough to crush armor. Twin eyes, pale as frost, scanned the clearing with predatory calm. Every movement was efficient, deliberate, honed by evolution to perfection. The first screams told the night when the beast struck. A reptilian cadet, confident in his armor, swung his claws too slowly. The Vulcan's strike was a blur, The cadet vanished beneath it, his armor folding like paper. The others roared in defiance, hurling themselves into combat, but their blows glanced uselessly off the beast's hide. The creature did not fight, it hunted, weaving between them, dismantling their formation with casual inevitability. From her vantage, Maya saw panic bloom like wildfire. The reptilian pack dissolved into scattered individuals, their unity broken. Across the valley, insectoid cries echoed as the Vulcan shifted direction, faster than their coordinated ambush. Shock charges detonated with blinding light, but when the haze cleared, the predator still advanced, unshaken. Her pulse hammered, but she forced herself still. Fear wanted her to run, to scatter like the others. Instead, she watched. Every movement, every feint, every kill. The Vulcan did not strike at random. It herded its prey, driving them into the open, cutting off their paths of retreat. It toyed with them before the kill, precise as a blade. She recognized the pattern, though it chilled her to acknowledge it. Wolves had done the same on Earth. Lions, even humans, when they hunted in packs, had used such tactics. It was not mindless savagery. It was intelligence honed into instinct. The thought came unbidden. Predators could be fought with weapons, but they could also be understood. And the moment they were understood, they could be reached. The Vulcan's pale eyes swept the clearing again, and this time they caught hers. Her stomach knotted, every nerve screaming to look away. But she did not. She straightened slowly, rising from the brush into full view, every movement deliberate, unthreatening. The cadets nearest her shrieked warnings, thinking her mad. She ignored them. Her gaze did not break. She remembered every tale of humanity's ancestors, how they had turned wolves into allies, how they had bent horses to carry them, how they had taught elephants to march into war. Humanity's strength had never been raw power. It had been the audacity to approach what others feared and to claim kinship. The Vulcan stepped closer, its massive paws crushing brush to powder. Its breath came in slow huffs, steaming in the cool night air. The cadets around her scattered, unwilling to be near her when she died. Still, Maya stood. Her voice, when it came, was low but steady. Not enemy, not prey. The words were meaningless to the beast, yet her tone carried intent. She lifted her hand, palm open, a gesture older than civilization. The predator stopped. The silence was total. The cadets watching from cover froze as the Vulcan's head lowered, its frost-pale eyes never leaving hers. It inhaled deeply, as if testing her scent, and rumbled a sound too low for translation. Maya's breath caught, but she did not move. The standoff stretched, heartbeats drawn into eternity. Then, impossibly, the Vulcan sank onto its haunches, its head bowing in something eerily like submission. The cadets gasped, whispers rushing through the foliage. None of them had seen such a thing, not in years of training nor in all the tales of the trial. The apex predator, terror of the academy, had yielded. Not to strength, not to weapons. To her. Maya lowered her hand, her body trembling despite her controlled posture. The Vulcan did not rise. It remained where it was, its vast frame curled in a patient crouch at her feet, as though waiting. The screams of retreat and the chaos of combat faded into the background. All eyes fixed on her, on the impossible sight of the predator made still. She felt the weight of their stares, the sharp edges of their disbelief. For the first time since her arrival, there was no laughter, only silence, and the sense that something irrevocable had shifted. The instructors halted the simulation the moment the Vulcan bent its head. Sirens cut through the artificial wilderness, signaling the end of the trial, though no one dared to move until the extraction transports descended. The cadets gathered in stunned silence, their eyes drawn again and again to the predator crouched at Maya's side, calm and immovable as if tethered to her presence. When the transport doors opened, the Vulcan rose with her and followed. Not even the instructors intervened. Inside the transport, the cadets avoided her gaze. Some stared openly, their faces twisted with confusion and unease, while others refused to look at her at all. The reptilian who had mocked her in the mess hall sat rigid against the bulkhead, scales dulled with fear, as though proximity to her carried a contagion. The insectoid cadets clattered their mandibles in whispered conversation, glancing at her with something sharper than curiosity, suspicion, perhaps even fear. The Vulcan settled at her feet, muscles relaxed, breathing steady. Its massive head rested against the transport floor, pale eyes half-lidded. Maya kept one hand lightly on its hide, her own heartbeat struggling to steady itself. She did not feel triumphant. She felt exposed, as though she had revealed something about herself and her species that could never be taken back. When they landed in the Academy Dome, the instructors ushered the cadets into formation. The Vulcan trailed Maya without hesitation, its claws clicking softly against the steel. Murmurs rippled through the crowd gathered to witness their return. What should have been another retelling of cadet panic and predator dominance had become something unrecorded in the Academy's history. The lead instructor, the scarred avian, stepped forward. His feathers bristled in a display of authority as he spoke. The Vulcan yields to no one. Yet today it yielded. Explain. Maya swallowed hard. She knew the answer would shape more than her reputation. It might shape her species' place in the galaxy. She met the avian's unblinking eyes. I didn't fight it. I recognized it. Predators know predators. And predators know when they are not facing prey. The avian tilted his head, considering her words. Around them, the cadets shifted uneasily. One of the insectoids hissed, voice amplified by its translator. Deception. She used some hidden tool. No being tames a Vulcan. The Vulcan's head lifted at the sound, and its low growl rolled across the dome. The insectoid froze, limbs locking in place. Maya's hand brushed the predator's hide, steadying it, and the growl subsided. Gasps rippled through the assembly. The demonstration needed no further explanation. The instructors dismissed the cadets, but whispers followed Maya through every corridor. She felt them in the mess hall, where conversations hushed at her arrival, and in the barracks, where silence stretched as she walked past. Some gazes carried fear, others resentment, but none carried laughter anymore. The reptilian who had once taunted her finally confronted her days later. He cornered her in the training yard, his scales gleaming in the artificial light. "What are you?" he demanded, voice low but edged with desperation. No human should command what cannot be commanded. Maya held his gaze. "Maybe that's the problem. You've all been trying to command. I didn't. I gave it something else to follow." He sneered, though the expression was strained. "You've made yourself a danger. To us, to the Academy. Be careful, human." The threat lingered, unspoken yet heavy. Maya turned away, but the Vulcan's sudden appearance at her side silenced further words. The reptilian retreated with a hiss, unwilling to test whether the predator's loyalty was real. The Academy adjusted to her presence with reluctant caution. Training continued, but formations shifted around her, cadets instinctively giving her distance. Even in group exercises, they treated her less as a peer and more as an anomaly. The instructors, however, watched her closely, murmuring among themselves as they recorded every detail of her behavior and the Vulcan's obedience. One evening, she was summoned to the observation chamber. The scarred avian awaited her, with two other senior instructors, a massive mammalian veteran with silvered fur and a crystalline entity whose voice resonated like struck glass. Together they studied her in silence before the avian spoke. "Humanity was admitted to this academy as an experiment," he said, his voice clipped and sharp. "We expected failure. We expected your fragility to prove you unworthy. Instead, you have altered the parameters of the trial itself. Do you understand the consequences?" Maya folded her arms, standing straighter despite the weight of their scrutiny. "I understand that you underestimated us." The crystalline instructor's voice chimed with dissonance. "Underestimation is one thing. Fear is another. You have given your peers reason for both." The mammalian leaned forward, his fur bristling. "The Vulcan is a weapon we could never tame. If your kind can bend such beasts, then war itself may change. Allies may fear you. Enemies will mock you first." Their words struck her harder than the cadets' ridicule ever had. It was one thing to endure mockery. It was another to carry the weight of suspicion and fear on behalf of her entire species. Yet she felt no regret. What she had done was not a trick. It was an extension of who humans were: survivors, adapters, builders of bonds where none should exist. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "But if it changes how you see us, then maybe it needed to happen." The avian studied her for a long moment before dismissing her. She left the chamber with the Vulcan padding silently at her heels, a living symbol of the shift she had caused. Days later, during another survival drill, the change became undeniable. Her squad faltered under pressure, their cohesion unraveling as the simulation escalated. Panic set in, cadets scattering much as they had before. Maya barked commands, and to their surprise, some obeyed. The Vulcan guarded their flank, its presence alone forcing the simulation's predators to hesitate. They regrouped, reformed, and held. For the first time, the squad completed the exercise without collapse. Afterward, one of the mammalian cadets approached her hesitantly. His voice was low, cautious. "Teach me. Whatever it is you did, teach me." Maya met his eyes, seeing in them not fear, but the beginning of respect. The first fragile thread of something greater. The academy was shifting around her, though whether it leaned toward reverence or hostility remained uncertain. What was clear was this: she could no longer be ignored, and neither could the species she represented. In the barracks that night, as whispers rose and fell, Maya lay awake with the Vulcan curled at the foot of her bunk. She knew the instructors would not contain this forever. News would spread beyond the academy walls. High Command would hear of the human who turned predator into ally. And when they did, the galaxy's careful hierarchy of power would tremble. For the first time since she had arrived, Maya allowed herself a faint, unguarded smile. The laughter was gone. In its place stood something far more dangerous. The summons arrived without explanation. A single pulse through Maya's comm implant, followed by coordinates for the Grand Strategy Chamber. Only the highest-ranking cadets and instructors were ever called there. She felt every stare as she walked the academy's corridors, the Vulcan pacing silently at her side, its claws striking sparks against the polished floor. The cadets pressed back against the walls to let her pass, some lowering their gazes, others glaring openly. Respect and resentment had fused into something more volatile. Inside the chamber, a holographic projection of a star system burned in the air, its planets highlighted with crimson markers. Senior instructors surrounded the display, their expressions carved in stone and steel. The scarred avian gestured for her to step forward. Around him stood the crystalline entity, the silver-furred mammalian, and several others whose authority radiated from every movement. "You will lead a squad in tomorrow's war simulation," the avian said, voice sharp as a blade. "Not as an observer, but as commander. Your peers will follow your orders. If they do not, they will fail. If you do not, you will fail. Humanity's worth rests on this trial." The words struck her like a weight, but she nodded once. Behind her, the Vulcan growled low, as though sensing the gravity of the moment. When the day came, the simulation activated with the violence of reality. Their squad was dropped into a scarred battlefield, a wasteland of craters, shattered structures, and choking smoke. Enemy units swarmed in every direction, holographic but armed with lethal precision. The cadets around her hesitated, glancing at one another, waiting for someone to seize control. Maya's voice cut through the chaos. "Form a wedge. Mammalians on the front, reptilians to their flanks, insectoids high for cover. I'll take center with the Vulcan." For a breath, no one moved. Then the mammalian cadet, who had once asked her to teach him, shifted into place. His choice broke the silence, and others followed, uncertain but compelled. The wedge took shape. The enemy struck hard, raining fire from elevated positions. The formation buckled, fear flaring. Maya pressed forward, the Vulcan thundering beside her, its roar scattering the simulation's attackers into disarray. She seized the moment, directing insectoids to flank from above, reptilians to pin the enemy line. Slowly, impossibly, the tide shifted. Her cadets fought with a unity they had never known. The Vulcan's presence gave them a fulcrum, but it was her clarity, her refusal to waver, that held them together. Where once they had dismissed her, now they obeyed. The simulation ended with their enemies routed, the battlefield secured. The silence afterward was deafening. Cadets who had mocked her stood breathing hard, their eyes locked on her with something close to awe. The instructors emerged from the observation platforms, their faces inscrutable. The avian's voice echoed through the chamber. "Victory. Against odds designed for failure." No one laughed. No one doubted. The human had done what none of them had. In the mess hall that evening, the tension broke like a dam. Cadets surrounded her, some demanding explanations, others offering hesitant praise. The reptilian who had once threatened her approached with deliberate slowness. For a long moment, he said nothing, then inclined his head the slightest fraction, a gesture of respect in his culture. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. Maya accepted it with a quiet nod, though she knew the meaning stretched far beyond her. Humanity had stepped from the shadows of mockery into the blaze of scrutiny. Every choice she made from this point would echo across more than her own life. That night she sat in the barracks, the Vulcan curled protectively around her bunk. She thought of earth, of oceans and forests, of wolves that had become companions, of horses that had carried civilizations. Her species had never been the largest, nor the fastest, nor the strongest. Yet they had always endured, always adapted, always found a way to turn danger into alliance. The Academy had seen only the beginning of that truth. Beyond its walls stretched empires, fleets, and enemies who believed themselves secure in their power. They did not yet understand what humanity could become. Maya lay back, her hand resting lightly on the predator's hide. For the first time since her arrival, she felt the laughter of her peers not as an echo in her mind, but as something buried, gone, replaced by a silence that carried both fear and respect. It was a silence that promised change. And in that silence, she knew the galaxy was beginning to listen. The Academy did not wait long before escalating. Maya's performance in the war simulation had unsettled more than cadets. It had drawn the attention of those beyond the dome, commanders and dignitaries whose voices carried across fleets. Orders came down from high command. The human and her predator would demonstrate their capabilities in a larger exercise, this time against multiple squads. It would no longer be a test of her survival. It would be a test of her command against overwhelming opposition. The announcement spread like fire through the barracks. Cadets spoke in tight clusters, their voices laced with envy, dread, and a hunger to see her undone. Some whispered that it was a trap, that no one survived a trial designed to crush 3 squads at once. Others speculated that the instructors wanted to measure whether her influence extended beyond a single desperate victory. Whatever the reason, every gaze turned toward her as she crossed the hall, the Vulcan at her side, its pale eyes glinting with uncanny calm. Maya felt the weight of those stares but refused to show unease. She had spent weeks walking under ridicule. She would not falter now under suspicion. Still, when she reached her bunk that night, silence pressed down on her chest. She rested her hand on the predator's flank, its steady breathing grounding her in the storm. "They want to see us fail," she murmured, more to herself than to the beast. The Vulcan's ears twitched, but it gave no sound, as if in tacit agreement. Dawn brought the trial. The recruits were herded into the grand simulation hall, a space so vast its ceilings vanished into darkness. Terrain shifted under the hum of hidden machinery, jagged ridges, collapsed cities, scorched plains. It felt less like a battlefield and more like a broken world. Holographic projectors ignited above, casting fleets of enemy signatures across the sky. Her squad assembled around her, those who had fought beside her before, their eyes uncertain but steady. They looked to her without question now, though their silence brimmed with the knowledge that failure meant not just their own defeat, but the discrediting of everything she represented. Across the field, the other squads stood bristling with confidence, eager to remind the Academy that one human victory had been nothing more than an anomaly. The signal bled, and chaos ignited. Enemy constructs surged from the horizon, machines shaped like nightmares, their weapons glowing with lethal intent. Maya's squad held formation, but they were outnumbered 3-1. The opposing squads fought with raw force, clashing headlong against the simulated enemy, but in doing so they weakened themselves. Their lines crumbled, their communication fractured. She saw it at once. Their arrogance was her opening. "Hold position," she ordered, voice cutting through the storm. "Let them bind themselves out." Her squad hesitated only a moment before obeying. They drew back into cover. The Vulcan crouched low at the front, its growl vibrating through their bones. As the other squads flailed against the constructs, she redirected her unit like a blade slipping between armor plates. Insectoids darted to high ground, reptilians drove into the enemy's flanks, mammalians anchored the line with relentless fury. Every move was precise, every strike calculated. The Volcan tore through the enemy like living thunder, yet it never strayed from her side. At her command it leapt, crushed, and withdrew, its obedience as sharp as any weapon. Cadets who had once mocked her now followed its movements with awe, their own strikes falling into rhythm with the Predator's. What had once been chaos hardened into cohesion, not born of fear but of trust. The tide turned. One squad collapsed entirely, their cadets scrambling from the simulation with defeat stamped across their faces. Another fell soon after, their arrogance undone by exhaustion. Maya's unit pressed forward, weaving through wreckage and fire until the last construct fell and silence draped itself over the battlefield. When the simulation ended, the whole returned to stillness. The other squads stood battered and humiliated. Maya's stood together, scarred but unbroken, the Volcan looming like a sentinel in their midst. For the second time, she had led them through an exercise designed for failure, and for the second time she had emerged not merely intact but victorious. The instructors descended, their eyes fixed on her. The crystalline commander's voice rang like glass struck true. This is no anomaly. This is pattern. Humanity has revealed a talent we miscalculated. The silver-furred veteran growled deep in his chest, and a danger we cannot ignore. Their words spread faster than fire. In the mess hall, cadets no longer whispered in derision but in awe and apprehension. Some approached her with open questions, eager to learn what made her different. Others kept their distance, unwilling to stand too close to someone who blurred the lines between comrade and threat. Even those who once despised her now weighed their words with caution. That night, Maya sat alone by the viewport, the Volcan resting at her side. Stars wheeled silently beyond the glass, indifferent and infinite. She thought of the path that had led her here, from the jeers of her first arrival to the suffocating silence of respect earned by Faye. Every step had carried not just her own weight, but the weight of Earth itself. She wondered what High Command would make of this second victory, whether they would see humanity as allies to elevate or as rivals to contain. Her hand rested against the Predator's hide, its warmth steady against her palm. She felt no illusion of safety, only the certainty that her place at the academy had irrevocably changed. What had begun as a fight for belonging had become something larger, something far more dangerous. Humanity had shown its teeth, and the galaxy was beginning to notice. For the first time, she let herself exhale. Victory was theirs, but she knew it was only a beginning. Beyond the academy, larger battles waited, and with them choices that would shape not just her fate, but the fate of her people. The silence that filled the room was heavy, but beneath it thrummed a promise. Humanity was no longer a footnote in the galaxy's story. They had become a question, and questions demanded answers. The academy did not sleep after Maya's second victory. Reports leapt across encrypted channels, feeding into the ears of admirals and councils who rarely wasted thought on cadet trials. By the next cycle, orders arrived. The human recruit and her predator would participate in a joint exercise with seasoned veterans, a simulation meant to replicate a full-scale conflict. It was no longer about her proving herself among peers. It was about measuring humanity against the standards of war itself. When she entered the briefing hall, the tension was visible. Veterans lined the chamber, hulking reptilians with scarred hides, insectoid tacticians whose limbs clicked with restless precision, mammalian commanders bearing the stillness of seasoned killers. They eyed her with the same expression, suspicion wrapped in curiosity. The Volcan followed at her heel, its pale eyes gleaming in the low light, a reminder that the human was never truly alone. The lead coordinator, a crystalline strategist whose voice carried like the toll of distant bells, outlined the mission. A fortress held by enemy constructs, reinforced with layers of defenses designed to break even veteran formations. The task: breach, seize, and hold. This will determine whether your kind has a place in our wars, the strategist intoned, shards of its form pulsing faintly with emphasis. Maya said nothing, but her chest tightened. She felt the weight of the room pressing against her, not just from the instructors but from every veteran studying her, as though she were an unstable weapon. The deployment was swift. Drop pods tore through the simulated sky, slamming into scorched earth. As they emerged, chaos erupted. Enemy fire lit the horizon, raining destruction with surgical accuracy. Veteran units responded with trained precision, pushing forward with disciplined formations. Yet the enemy constructs were relentless, hammering their lines with unyielding force. Maya's unit held the center. Her cadets, now hardened by their shared victories, trusted her commands without hesitation. The Vulcan prowled before them, intercepting strikes, its roar scattering automated foes like frightened prey. But the fortress loomed ahead, its defenses unbroken, its gates pouring endless reinforcements. The veterans fought fiercely, but their strategies faltered against the sheer weight of resistance. Old habits locked them into predictable maneuvers, and the enemy adapted with brutal efficiency. Frustration rippled through the ranks. "We will bleed out before we breach," one mammalian commander snarled through comms. Maya seized the opening. Her voice cut across channels with unshakable clarity. "Stop trying to crush them head-on. They want you predictable. Draw them out. Let them think we're breaking, then take them apart." The suggestion hung in the comnet like a blade. Veterans bristled at the audacity of a cadet issuing orders, but desperation gnawed sharper than pride. Slowly, grudgingly, they shifted their lines, feigning retreat, drawing constructs into open ground. It worked. The enemy surged forward, abandoning the security of their fortress. In that moment, Maya struck. She unleashed her cadets in a sudden thrust, the Vulcan spearheading the charge with primal fury. The constructs, unprepared for the shift, faltered. Reptilian veterans hammered their flanks, insectoids swarmed from above, mammalians tore through the gaps. The fortress defenses wavered. For the first time, the veterans fought not in isolation, but in rhythm with her. Their movements bent toward her strategies, their force magnified by her timing. What began as reluctant obedience hardened into grudging trust. Hours bled into one another as the fortress finally cracked. The gate fell, and the Allied units surged inside, driving the constructs into collapse. The simulation ended with the fortress secured, the battlefield littered with the echoes of their combined effort. When silence fell, the veterans turned to her. Their expressions were no longer merely suspicious. Some held awe, others unease, but all carried recognition. She had done what they had failed to achieve alone. She had turned disparate forces into a single, decisive weapon. The crystalline strategist appeared once more, its voice resonating across the chamber. Humanity has shown a faculty not for strength, but for shaping strength in others. You lead where others fracture. This is significant. Maya stood still, the Vulcan at her side, its breath steady, its presence as solid as stone. She felt the truth of the words settle on her shoulders, heavier than any mockery she had endured before. This was no longer about proving her place in the academy. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. Later, in the solitude of her barracks, she sat with her thoughts. Her cadets celebrated quietly nearby, their laughter cautious but genuine for the first time. The Vulcan lay stretched across the floor, its pale eyes half-closed, though she sensed it was never truly at rest. She reached down, her hand brushing against its hide. "Not strength," she whispered. "Not speed. Not claws or carapace. Just us." The predator's steady breathing was her only reply, but it was enough. Humanity had entered the academy as a curiosity, a fragile experiment destined for failure. Now, through her, they had become something else, something that made even veterans pause and reconsider the order of power they had long taken for granted. Yet Maya knew the hardest battles had not yet begun. The academy could be swayed, but beyond its walls lay empires that would not welcome such disruption. What frightened her was not whether humanity could survive those trials, but whether the galaxy was ready for what survival would mean. As the lights dimmed, she lay back on her bunk, the Vulcan's warmth at her feet, and closed her eyes. She could still feel the eyes of the veterans, the instructors, the cadets, every one of them trying to understand what she represented. Not prey, not anomaly, not accident, a beginning.